it's almost impossible to talk about drug development without bringing in the money. So here's my 2 cents. These days, it's costing us over $40 billion a year to run clinical trials. And almost $15 billion are spent on clinical trial recruitment, getting patients on clinical trials. And so what are we getting with that money? And now I'm going to sound like an episode of Days of Our Lives because I'm repeating the numbers that have been said many times over during the course of the day. But with the money that we're spending on clinical trials and recruitment, only 6% of clinical trials are completed on schedule. And 80% of clinical trials are due to delays in failed enrollment. And actually 40% of clinical trials are canceled altogether because lack of patients. So, and at the same time, we have 15% of patients with cancer, who are actually aware that clinical trial was ever an option for them. But at the same time, the recent study shows that almost 70% of patients would be willing to share their data if it was for a good reason. So clearly we have a gap there between the amount of clinical trials that complete or are failing because of bad recruitment and with the patients that would be willing to give their data if it was to help them or help other patients. And that is the gap that we intend to fill with Remission Coach. So we are building a system that will allow patients to find clinical trials that have a potential to extend their lives and at the same time help pharmaceutical industry meet their clinical trial criteria and design targeted trials. Now I guess many of you are going, so yeah, we've had this before, we have these systems, but where these systems are failing is they are designed backwards. So they make the patient answer a few questions or even more questions, but at the end of the day, the systems are same. So the patient has to go in, fill in details, and then is given in return potential trials that they might be eligible for. And after that, they have to navigate the criteria, which are pretty complex. And at the end of the day, they may contact pharmaceutical company or another site doing a clinical trial and may or may not get a response in a meaningful time. So one of the big problems with the system is the language. So, and if you're not following the slides, don't worry. If you don't speak Klingon, you're not supposed to. But to a patient going through cancer, especially if a patient is in the later stages of the disease, it is not far different. The first paragraph is not far different from the second, which is a direct translation according to Google Klingon translator of the clinical trial criteria. Now for a patient, I'm sure there are other cancer survivors than me in the audience. If you are a patient, the latter doesn't make any sense. And even to physicians who are overburdened by the task that's upon them, this is probably, to my guess is, this is one of the reasons why so few patients actually try to get their patients to a clinical trial, because it takes a lot of time to navigate through all those criteria that you have to go through and see if your patient actually fits into a clinical trial. So this is the reason why we chose to make Remission Coach, we turned the situation upside down. So the patient enters their clinical and medical history along with the molecular profiling data that more and more patients nowadays have. They enter it through a secure, easy to use, self-guiding system to a Remission Coach secure database, which is HIPAA compliant, of course. And in this system, we have a data model that is capable of combining the medical, clinical, and molecular profiling data into one system where the data is unified, and then we have a separate access for pharmaceutical industry to go in, filter in their details, and find those patients who are actually eligible for these trials. So at the end of the day, what you have is a patient-driven, patient-focused system that helps patients find the trials, and actually it puts those people who are best equipped to design clinical trials into the driver's seat. So pharmaceutical companies can find the patients, and they will then initiate contact to a patient who up until this moment is still anonymous to the pharmaceutical company. So, and then when a match is found, the patient has the final say so whether they want to establish contact with this pharmaceutical company who is designing this trial that is targeted directly to him or her, the patient. So at the end of the day, the solution is pretty simple. It's just turning whatever we currently have upside down. And I will actually be brief because I've reached my final slide. But I will end up with a number as I started with a number. So every day, like many presenters before me have shown, 1.6 million patients are diagnosed with cancer each year. Now, if we are able to find meaningful therapy for just 1% of those patients, we will have helped 16,000 people within every year. Now, I don't know about any of you guys, but that to me is priceless. Because how do you put a price on something like that? And at the same time, pharmaceutical industry can help enormous amounts of time and money that is being wasted on the recruitment process as it is today.